Tara?
Hi, ma'am. I just wanted to ask, must we reference in the email? I was just thinking it wasn't very formal if we asked, so that's why I just wanted to ask.
Yes, you will need to reference in an email. Now, in real life, with a real email, you obviously wouldn't reference, but
Yeah.
because this is an assignment, everything will need to be referenced. So you will, at the very least, need to reference the CAPS document.
Okay,
So
thank
reference
you.
as normal. I'll double check, but I don't think the references count towards the word count. Okay, they haven't in the past, so don't worry about including that in your word count. Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions about question 1? I don't see you raise your hand. Please just unmute and shout out. Sorry, someone said something in the chat.
Hi, Amy, it's Elsabe.
Hi.
So
yes.
with this email, when we teach transactional writing at school, then an email, you have to say to in the subject line and CC and all that stuff.
Yes.
Are we going to be judged on that type of format?
Yes. So
it's kind of a test in transactional writing as well.
Yes, absolutely. So if you look at this last point, attend to correct email format and etiquette, that is, we are assessing, did you have to with an email address? Did you have a subject, line? So a concise subject. Did you have dear and the person's name? Then your short introduction, it can be 1 line if you need. Then paragraphs, 1 line conclusion, or however long you need your conclusion to be. And then the sign off, kind regards, your name. I hope that helps.
Can I just say there's always ambiguity. Some formats say you must say date and then write the date, and others don't because email generates its own date.
No,
what would you...
for this you can leave the date out because in real life, I know we're having referencing, which we wouldn't have in real life, but in real life, we don't really date our emails. So you don't need to put the date in. Okay. Alyssa? So you've got your hand?
I just wanted to ask, so with the word count being like really little, does the email address we're sending it to and the CC and count towards the words, or is it just purely like the body of our email that we are looking at?
Just the body. So it starts from dear and then the name.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
No problem. Elsabe?
So sorry, I did ask my question. I just forgot to lower my hand.
Okay. Kelsey?
Hi, ma'am. I just wanted to ask a question regarding who would we be addressing? Is it fine if we just address the science department? Dear science department, because there's no specific name for this email.
So what you would actually do is make up a name.
Okay, so you want us to make up a name?
Yeah, you wouldn't actually address it to a science department, you would address it to a person. So because they haven't specified a name, you just make one up.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
No problem. Okay. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any other hands up, but if you have a question, just unmute and yell out. Yes, Kelsey.
Sorry, one last question. I just wanted to ask, in terms of format, how formal you want us to write this email. I know, like on day-to-day, people's formalness of emails isn't always very formal. So, in terms of like addressing the email, does it have to be dear? Because that's more like letter writing. I don't know if.
So, yes, actually a very good question. In terms of the formality, it would be dear Mr. So-and-so or dear Ms. So-and-so. And then you're looking for, if I can put it, smart casual. So it's not formal writing because you're writing to someone you know. But because it is on a serious matter and it is official, it needs to be correct English. So if your English is correct and you've taken out any colloquialisms or anything that sounds very casual, then your tone should be correct. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that answers my question. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Business English, yes, that's the perfect way to put it.
Sorry, Amy, just another thing I wanted to know. When you say the CAPS document, can we refer to grades 10 to 12, the FET, or because I see the senior phase is recommended by ARC? Can it be either one?
Sorry, that is a mistake on ARC. This is the FET, so you would refer to the FET CAPS. So thank you for pointing that out. We always use FET CAPS for this module.
Excellent, thanks.
Okay, so as I said in the video, your main thing is keeping it to the word count. So you just want to get in, state the obvious, a little explanation of the obvious, and then move on. Remember, you need to get your point across. So you need to explain exactly what you mean, but still remember that the science teacher doesn't care. The science teacher does not want to know the intricacies. The science teacher only wants to know the main points and how that affects the hours and the timetabling. Okay, so just stick to your main points there. Okay, so question 2, in a structured and academically sound paragraph, explain the importance of acknowledging diversity in the classroom and discuss with examples the ways in which teachers can accommodate diversity in the FET classroom. Ensure you use the IIE Harvard-style referencing method for your citations. So just to remind you, there is a new referencing guide. So please make sure you're using the new referencing guide. It is up on ARC under module information. Okay, so questions. All good? Okay. If anyone does have a question, I can't see any hands up. Just yell out. Okay, so please remember you are going to have to reference. So when they talk about an academically sound paragraph, what they're saying is, please make sure that you have referenced something. Paragraphs, minimum half a page, maximum, absolute maximum 1 page. Okay, if you've gone over 1 page, then it's not a paragraph anymore. You've had too many ideas. There's no way you've just stuck to a main idea. So please make sure you get it between that half a page and 1 page. Okay, nothing else? Great. Oh, one more thing I just want to highlight, the examples. So those you can come up with on your own. Please don't feel pressured to go and find them. In fact, the best examples will be the ones that you come up with. Okay, so one of the poems, Remember the Garden of Love, and I'm very sorry, but I just call it the Jeremy Cronin one because otherwise I'm going to humiliate myself and probably be offensive if I try and pronounce that. So 3.1, choose one of the teaching approaches to literature that you would use to teach this poem. Explain the approach, justify why this approach is suitable to use to teach this poem. Provide practical examples in your justification. Okay, questions on that one? Yes, Tara.
I just wanted to double check on the approaches because you only mentioned the three, so I didn't know if there were more. It was just the author, chronological, and theme approach.
Yes, there's one more. It is author, chronological, theme, and genre. So it's those four. Yeah, some really apply really well. Some don't apply really well.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much.
But it's just, it's really just using common sense. Don't be shy to go with your gut on that one. Okay, Alexandra?
Hi, good evening.
Hi.
I was just wondering, so the three poems here, remember the Garden of Love and that last one, I'm not going to try because I just know that I'm going to butcher it. But where do we get given these or do we have to look them up ourselves? Are they
You'll have to look them up yourselves, but they're very easy to find. You just type them into Google and they'll come right up.
Yeah, hopefully I find the right ones.
Oh yeah, just type in, they're very famous, so you type in that name and the author, you'll get the correct one. There aren't any others like them.
Thank you very much.
Interject for a moment? May I interject for a moment? Can you hear
Yes,
me?
of course.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you use the Western Cape Digital Education Platform under Home Language English and First Additional Language English, all of these poems you do have access to all of those poems there, as they are part of the current curriculum.
Okay, there you go. Perfect, thank you. Okay, is there, yeah, Alexandra, do you still have your hand up? Okay, any other questions? Okay, perfect. So as I've said in the video, you want to explain the approach. So pretend that the person doesn't understand and then say why this approach is the best approach for this poem. And then you have to quote from the poem. That's where your practical examples come in, is quoting from the poem. And also, we would always use more than one approach. We're going to look at the approaches in a few minutes, but we would use more than one approach in real life. In this case, we're saying, if you could just choose one approach, what would be the main approach that you would choose? Okay. And then question 3.2, design an original and engaging resource that you will use in the lesson to teach this poem. Ensure your resource is informative and clearly linked to the teaching approach you identified in 2.1. Okay, Kelsey.
Ma'am, I just have a question on how long we can, like how many words you would like per question or wouldn't like if it's too much, because I have a tendency to write too much.
So for the email, there's the word count, so it has to be under 300. For the paragraph, needs to come in at under a page. So you can go up to a page, you can push it to 1 page. With 3.1, it's 8 marks. So you are looking to make around 10 to 12 good points. So you're looking to write 10 to 12 things that I can put a tick next to. So with that, it's going to be up to you how long you write for. There isn't really a guideline, it's just your common sense. Just make sure that you're not repeating yourself. That's the main thing. And if ever you are unsure, just take the number of marks. I have to tick that number of times. So always add in a couple of extra points in case one of your points is a bit iffy and I can't give it a mark. So put in some extra ones to make up.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
No problem. What other questions? Yes, Elsa B.
Hi, I just wanted to ask, can we then say that our target market is, say, or our listeners are home language grade 10? Can one say that as part of why you would choose a specific approach?
No, that's actually, I'm very glad you asked that. This is for matrics. So
Oh, right.
It does say in the rubric, it is suitable for matrics. If I just go down, rubric, resource is completely suitable for a matric class. So
Okay,
that's what
thank
you're
you.
looking for.
And let's say one chooses a specific approach and you justify it really well, you justify your choice well. But it's not what you, for instance, or what the common sense approach might be, but the justification is well. Would you then get the marks?
If you can come up with 8 good points why that is a good approach to use, then you get 8 marks.
Okay, thank you.
What I can tell you is looking at them, like there's one approach where I can see for one of the poems, you would really struggle to get 8 good points, but there'll be 1 or 2 other approaches where it'll be easy to find 8 points. So there isn't a wrong answer here. It's all about how you justify it. And some approaches are just much easier to justify because it's just much more intuitive. So I hope that helps. Any other questions? Yes. Radia? I'm so sorry. I'm terrible with pronunciations. Am I getting your name right? Sharadia. Ibrahim. Have you got a question? You're still on mute. I'm afraid I still can't hear you. Can you type it in the chat? And while you're doing that, no one's asked, but I'm just going to say, with the length of the resource, remember it's whatever you are doing for your resource will determine how long your resource has to be. Remember, it's 12 marks, so you want to give enough that 12 marks, it's worthy of at least 12 marks, 12% of your final total. Tara?
So is it just one resource that you would use, or can you use multiple?
So you can use multiple if you want. So if you want to have like an infographic and then a worksheet attached to it, you're more than welcome to. But it does just ask for one.
Amy,
Yes.
so would a resource be like a PowerPoint slideshow with questions and answers at the end?
Oh,
Would
yes.
that be suitable?
So a slideshow, a worksheet. If you want to be really creative, you could do a video, you could do anything, absolutely anything that would help you teach and would help the learners learn. That's what a resource is. Oh, sorry. Yes, thank you for pointing that out. In question 3.2 is supposed to read clearly linked to the teaching approach you identified in 3.1. That is the typo. It is the approach that you identified in 3.1. So please make sure that you do use that approach, because it is quite easy to get caught up in these great ideas and then sort of forget that you've got to use a certain approach. Okay, any other questions? Yes, Alyssa.
I feel like this might be really silly, ma'am, but I'm gonna ask anyways.
No such thing
For
as a silly question.
Thank you. For question 3.2, do we have to explain why we like have chosen that resource? Do we have to
No,
like justify it, or do we just give you the resource?
just give me the resource.
Okay,
So this is
perfect.
a very, very practical one.
Okay,
You
cool.
just do the resource and give it in.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
No problem. Okay, anything else? Okay, so the big one, the essay question. Please, please, please look at the rubric, because there's stuff on the rubric that isn't necessarily spelled out in the question. Like for 3.2, it says matric curriculum here, but on the rubric, it spells out it must be for a matric class. So just double check that rubric. So the communicative approach is based on the concept that language learning occurs when the teacher gets learners to see the language pragmatically, to mediate meaning from purpose, to do things which resemble in some measure what they do with their own language. Guys, please do not get hung up on that quote. It's just there to sort of provide some context, the idea of the communicative approach and using language practically. That's all it is. So people say, how long? What's the word count? What's the least number of words? What's the most number of words? Right there. 1,500 to 1,750. If you're way under 1,500, you don't have enough information, and I stop marking at 1,750. So expository and discursive, so you have to explain and then you have to discuss. So the explain part is where your referencing is going to come in, and the discursive part is where you share your thoughts. So we've even broken it down for you into exactly what you need to look at. You need to explain the communicative and the text-based approaches to teaching. So that is just a straightforward explanation. Discuss the advantages of using these approaches to teach the core English skills. So here you're looking at the advantages in general, but you also want to look at how does each approach encourage the teaching and learning of the various skills. Obviously, some approaches are more geared towards certain skills. And then provide practical examples of lessons and activities you as an FET educator could use to integrate these approaches into the classroom. So that is what you would do. So very, very practical. And once again, that's a fantastic time for you to use your own thoughts, your own examples that come from you. use your own rationale to develop your discussion and exposition. So what we're looking at there is you have to put your own thoughts in. So that's really important. The way I suggest you do it is to brainstorm all your thoughts, everything you know, everything you think first, and then go and do some research. Okay, so questions. Yes, Elsabe.
Hi again. So if we're doing our own thing, do we use, the subject I believe this is my opinion, or do we have to keep in passive language?
Passive. So one could argue, one would say, the reason for this is always it keeps a bit of distance between you as a person and the ideas that are being discussed. So you want to sort of put it as this approach could be used too. So it just avoids absolute definite statements like, I know that this approach will work because. It's just a quirk of academia. Okay, what other questions have we got? Okay, so questions about the assignment in general. Oh, so the short answer to the do you use I? No, you use one. Or it may be argued. Alexandra?
Just double checking, is this assignment individual and not team or group based? Okay.
Yeah, individual.
Good to know. All our in 2 of our other courses we've got group work, so I'm just making.
No,
Thank you.
all of the work here is individual for this course.
All right, thank you.
No problem. Alyssa?
Hello, ma'am. No one's actually said whether we have our assignment writing justified or left aligned. I just want to know if what you would prefer or what the Harvard referencing guide says.
I'm going to be honest. I do not have strong opinions. Left aligned is fine.
Okay,
So
perfect.
left aligned, one of the normal fonts, Times New Roman, Calabri, Arial, size 12, 1.5 spacing, but that's my ideal. I'm not hung up on justified or left hand or anything like that, as long as I can read it.
Thank you, ma'am.
No problem. Kelsey?
Ma'am, I just wanted to ask you regarding a cover page. I know another lecturer doesn't want cover pages or anything like that in terms of a cover page and table of contents. How do you feel about including cover pages and table of contents?
I'm not mad about them. They don't add value. If you do it, I'm not going to be upset about it, but it doesn't really add anything to your assignment. It just makes me scroll a little bit longer.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Yes. Is a reference this required? Yes, definitely. So in-text referencing, reference list at the end. Please, please, please get the referencing right. Just follow that guide. I actually recommend printing it out and having a physical copy so you can check your referencing. So please use that guide. Anything else? Yes, Elsabe.
Hi there. I've already started writing mine. I think it says the recommended hours on this is 10 hours.
Yes.
But is it realistic to double that? I mean, is that unusual? Are we going to miss the due date? When is the due date again? I always like to come in way ahead of the due date. Sorry to ask when it is.
So the due date, if I'm not mistaken, sorry, I've got my calendar underneath my computer, the 26th. So you've got 20 days.
Thank you.
In terms of the hours, that is a rough guideline. What you're looking at is if you are spending 5 hours on it, you don't have enough information. You've skimped, you need to expand. If you're putting in 20 hours, either you are really going to hand in a really polished assignment, or else you need to check that you haven't written too much, so that your paragraph is realistic. So it's half a page to 1 page. Your essay is the required number of words. So you just want to check that you haven't sort of gone outside of those bounds, but going over the number is perfectly acceptable. It generally just means a more polished essay and a more polished assignment. Okay, sorry, so I see the question referencing under each question or all at the end. I'm going to ask for it all at the end. So referencing all at the end. And it's all in alphabetical order, so it'll all be jumbled up. Anything else? In terms of sources, I strongly recommend the Marguerite Vessel's book. I cannot remember the name for the life of me right now, but it is an excellent resource. In fact, if you're going to buy any textbook, I would recommend just buying that one because it's so useful and you'll use it in your classroom in real life. Okay.
Could you just maybe type the name? I know you don't know the name of the book, but like the author's name in the chat.
Probably not, because I have
Or could
no
you just
idea how
repeat
it's spelled.
the author's name?
It's Vessels, Wessels, I think.
Okay, thank you so much.
So you'll find it on the module outline. It's under recommended reading. So that's where you'll find it, module outline.
Perfect, thank you.
There you go, thank you. Practical Guide to Facilitating Language Learning. Okay, so that's great. If anyone has any other questions that they come up with or that they think of, please just pop them in the chat or email me. Always happy to help. Okay, so let's get on to the learning approaches. Okay, so learning unit 1. I just like that because it really does underline how awesome and awful the English language is. So, sorry, I have put up the wrong thing. This is the full one, but you know what? Let me just go through the full list. So the text-based approach. Now, with this, what we're looking at is you are using a text. Now, that means that it's an approach you use a lot in your work because we almost always teach from a text. So we are teaching an abstract concept through a practical means. So you're not just teaching, you know, when you're teaching them reading skills, obviously there are certain things that they need to know going into a reading lesson, but what they're doing is they're actually practicing reading and understanding by reading something. It's also really important for the structure and conventions because you're not just teaching them these abstract rules, which I'm afraid you are going to have to teach them because you'd think by grade 10 they would know. Not a chance. 90% of them have forgotten all the rules. So you do have to reteach the rules. But the main thing is to then put those rules into context by using a text. Viewing, we use a text. So anything where you use a text is the text-based approach. And then I had, in my other slideshow, I had a lovely picture of a little girl with a book. And the question I wanted to ask you people is, what connections can you see between text-based and communicative approach? And let me just quickly remind you, the communicative approach is where you use the language as much as possible to communicate. So you get the learners to use the language in as many different ways as you can. So picture a little girl with a book, and this is where I ask you, what connections can you see between text-based and the communicative approach? There are no silly answers. Connections, differences. Ways they can work together. Yes, Stephanie.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good evening. I'll give it a go. I would say the connection that you could see between them, because we talk about text-based being the book as you gave in your example, and we've got communicative being how we use language when we speak. Obviously, when we read a story, we're looking at the characters in their own interactions, which apply to our own lives. So although it's not an interaction that we are physically experiencing, it's still an interaction that we would come across in our life. So there's the connection in that both are practical in that sense.
Yes, excellent. Well done. Very
Thank
good.
If I may.
Yes.
I found, particularly with my experience in the industry of teaching, when my learners are faced with a text that they are even possibly struggling with, being able to communicate their struggles amongst themselves, allow them to build their understanding, because they are able to find that middle ground that has helped me even reach them in texts that they find difficult. Just to use a primary example, Shakespeare is often one of those texts that the learners struggle with, and yet they're able to find a way in their own context / language / collaboration to come to an understanding that I might not even be able to facilitate because they can communicate that text that they are viewing.
Yes, excellent point. It's almost the combination of the two together, exactly as you say. Putting them together, they can communicate their understanding of the text with each other. And often, as you'll find in practical terms, having them talk to each other in small groups or in pairs, they will discover a lot more than in a larger group discussion or just having you tell them. They will really get it on a deeper level by allowing them to discuss it themselves. So that's fantastic. Okay, text-based has to do with the text within the girl's book. Communicative language can be connected as it is the language being mastered by interacting with the text, the practice of reading and interacting with the language. Yes, now that is some lovely, slightly out-the-box thinking. Similar to, I think, what Stephanie was saying, is that by reading the text, you're actually seeing how the language is used, and you are seeing how the written word is being communicated. So when we talk about the communicative approach, we are talking about discussions, yes, absolutely. We're also talking about getting them to use the language in as many different ways as possible. So role-playing exercises, presentations, getting them to look at a text and look specifically at how the language is used, how the characters interact with each other. So things like, did that exchange between the characters feel realistic? And then maybe get them to role play it and see for themselves, does that sound like two people interacting normally, or is it very stilted? So you also want to give them practice with informal uses of language, and then formal uses of language, and everything in between. So it's a very, very broad approach that you are essentially giving them the language and telling them, here, play with it until you figure out how it works. Obviously, you have to provide structure and feedback and all the rest of it, but you are letting them play around with it. Okay, so that is the communicative approach and the text-based approach. So are there any questions at this point? Okay, so some of the questions that I want you guys to think about. And actually before that, I just want to point out this meme here. Is for a lot, depends on the context. Dollars, no. Murders, yes. Now, that seems rather trite, but that really does in some ways summarize the idea of the text-based approach. Is, what does this mean in context? So what do these rules mean in context? What does the idea of a metaphor mean in context? So it's all about putting English into context. And then some of the things I want you to think about: the importance of the text-based approach in teaching language in the FET classroom. What challenges to teaching and learning do you think you might occur when using the text-based approach? And then how would you overcome these difficulties? With the communicative approach, once again, why is it important in the FET classroom? We've already looked at what connection can you see between the communicative approach and the text-based. What do you believe will be some of the greatest challenges to using the communicative approach in the FET classroom? Teachers deal with these challenges. So I want you to really consider those questions. And then what are some of the difficulties? Some of the difficulties that I just told you to think about is there's going to be different cultural approaches, so different learning styles. Some learners you'll find just want to sit there and they're the student, you are the teacher, you are the source of knowledge, and they're just there to absorb the knowledge. And that's actually a cultural approach to education. So at the moment, especially if that is not your cultural approach to education, it can be easy to get frustrated that these learners are not participating. But there's more to it than them just being stubborn about it and just not wanting to come to the table. It is actually a cultural idea. Also, a thing that's very important is a lot of learners might feel a bit intimidated or a bit embarrassed about their own ability to communicate. So they worry about their language ability. So that is something to bear in mind as well. And then the process approach, this is the last approach to language learning before we get to literature. This is essentially you teach how to write an essay or how to do any form of writing as a process. So you don't just give them the topic and then say to them, okay, off you go and write it. Make sure you do your planning. What you do is you take them through the whole process. So from the brainstorming, you get them to do the brainstorming exercise. Then you get them to do the rough draft. Then you get them to edit the draft. You get a peer review edit. So you get them to peer edit each other. Then you get the final thing. And the various ways to get this done, things like, okay, you have to highlight 5 things in your draft that you changed in the final essay. So the whole thing is that they don't just see it as you sit down and you write, and then the only thing that matters is that you hand in a completed piece of writing. It's to show them the process that even when they write emails one day, there actually is, they go through a mental process of thinking about the ideas, putting the ideas together, and then typing the email. So although it will be quite a quick mental process, they'll understand what is going on when they need to put together anything that is written. Okay. So the main thing there is what sort of essay it is, and of course the structure of any writing. So, Tismia.
Hi, able to hear me?
Yes, I am.
I just wanted to find out. I noticed that with some students, or actually with many students, they don't really want to do a draft. Even if you take them through it, it's just like for them, it's just, just scribble a mind map or just write something down, and then they'll copy the exact same draft as their final, and just underline random things that they think would suffice being changes. It's like they don't take the planning process seriously. So I just wanted your advice on how we can combat that type of situation.
Okay, so what you've done is you've hit that nail on the head that we have these wonderful theories that this is how it should work. And then we actually are dealing with 20, 30, 40 individual teenagers. And the reality is they don't like doing drafts. They don't take it seriously. So one of the things is to walk around with a red pen and stop at their desks and make notes. Sometimes having a teacher, depends on the class, sometimes having the teacher come around and actually look at their work inspires them a bit. Getting them to peer review is always, theoretically, it is a good way to get them to take it a little bit more seriously because one of their peers is going to mark it. A good way to do that, I found, is to collect them and hand them out at random. So they don't, so it's not a case of, oh, I'm just going to pass it to my best friend and they'll just say something nice at the end. And to get the peers to actually highlight and make 5 points and then actually go around and check that they've made five comments, and call them out if they haven't. So a lot of it is sort of using peer pressure. I find is actually one of the better ways, or getting them to stand up and read their final piece and then take the draft and say, this is what I changed from the draft. So things like that. It sounds a bit mean, but it's one way to get them.
It makes sense, especially as you said, dealing with so many teenagers at once.
Yeah.
It is quite difficult. Thank you so much for that.
No problem. Elsevier.
Hi, yes, I remember you mentioning this to me as well, and it's so super useful because I've never seen a teacher get the peer reviewing going, which I think is very clever. But I was wondering, in adult life, one tends to write, and then time ends up being a very useful tool. Like you'd write something, put it aside for a week or 2 weeks, and when you return to it, you absolutely hate some of what you've written, and it's quite clear what you need to chop or change. But do teenagers think like that?
Yes, you can do this. This is actually, I distinctly remember my English teacher doing this when I was at high school, which I don't even want to think about how long ago that was, is to collect the drafts and then keep them for a week or so and then hand them out and get them to read it. And then actually it might be a good idea to pause and have a discussion or put them in groups to let them have a say in what they actually thought reading it again, or get them to write 3 lines that you will then mark saying what are their thoughts on their draft, having read it a week or 2 later. So that'll just get them to think about it. But yes, that is an excellent idea.
Thanks. I've never seen that in practice and I'd like to try it.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so approaches to teaching literature. Now remember, with literature, we're still teaching the English skills. We're just doing it through the medium of literature and hopefully introducing them to a little bit of the beauty of the English language and the beauty of some of the texts that are available to us. So the approaches to teaching literature, chronological approach. So what you're doing is you're looking at the timeline. Now, my favorite example of this is Sonnet 130, My Mistress' Eyes Are Nothing Like the Sun. It actually sounds like a real insulting poem. There's a lot of debate you can have about, is he insulting her or is he actually praising her by saying, yeah, she's a flawed woman like everyone, but I love her so much even though I can see all her flaws. But if you look at the chronology, if you look at the time frame that he was writing that poem in, what he was actually doing was mocking the Petrarchan sonnet or the Petrarchan poetry, because that was all about praising these amazing, beautiful goddess-like women who walk past the poor lover who has no hope of ever gaining the favor of this incredible beautiful goddess-like creature. And he's saying, that's BS. Women aren't like that. The real human beings, stop lying about them. So it was actually a mockery. And then, sometimes you have to understand the time period in order to understand the text, like The Great Gatsby. If you know nothing about prohibition, it's not going to make much sense. And then sometimes it's quite interesting if you're doing a futuristic book to look at how the time frame from the novel is different or similar to our time frame, how the time frame actually affects the reading of the novel. Then the author approach. Now, this one is really, it's important if the author's real life influences their work a lot. So if you've got a text that is in response to something that happened to the author, then the author approach is really important. A lot of the time it does make a huge difference who actually wrote it. We're looking at the text itself, but it can be really important if, say, someone has gone through something and they have written about that experience, or if they've undergone some sort of deep trauma and that trauma comes out in their writing, then it can really deepen your understanding of the text to look at who the author was and what it is in their life that really sort of inspired this piece of work. The theme approach, that's going to be in every single text you analyze. Maybe there might be one or two where you're not looking at the theme, but by and large, the theme is one of the foundations of what we look at in a text. So that's pretty much always going to be there. And then the genre approach is when you look at the conventions of the genre. So sometimes it doesn't really matter. It's just a novel. It's a fictional novel. But sometimes if you're looking at a specific genre that has specific expectations, then you want to use the genre approach. So if you're doing short stories and you're doing sort of maybe subversive fairy tales, so a fairy tale that is written that deliberately subverts our expectations of a fairy tale, then you need to use the genre approach, because the students need to know what the conventions of a fairy tale are in order to see how they're being subverted. Nonfiction is a good one because, for example, if you're reading an autobiography, there are some very, very strict things that have to be in place in order for it to be an autobiography. It has to be written by the person. It has to be true. They can't leave out really important parts of their life. For example, magic realism is a very particular genre that you need to understand the conventions in order to understand and really appreciate the novel or the text. Okay. So any questions on the approaches?
Amy, so obviously one of our questions in the assignment has to do with this.
Yes.
So let's say that I've chosen a poem where I want to apply the theme approach. As you say, theme is basically discussed in every poem. But one of the ideas I have is to look at the theme in the poem and then look at poems that have similar themes by the same writer and poems that have different themes but the same topic. So then kind of to, think more critically about themes. So sort of comparisons and discussions around that. Is that what you're looking for in that kind of resource that we've got to compile, like a PowerPoint or something?
So without looking at the full thing, that sounds like a very interesting direction to take your resource in, is to compare, use the same author and compare similar themes and poems with dissimilar themes. So yeah, I think you can really do something with that.
Okay, thank you.
It's a bit out the box, which is great. So I don't want to terrify the rest of you, but yeah, you can really do something with that. And then I see we've got a question in the thing. We can do the email format on Word, correct? Correct. So you literally just type to : the email address, enter subject : your subject line, enter dear whoever. Okay, so that is what I've got for you guys for tonight. I'm going to hang around for another few minutes if anyone has any other questions. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining. I hope you found it interesting and I hope you got something out of it. It was great to see you. Please enjoy your weekend. And if you need anything, please just drop me an email. Okay, so have a great weekend, everyone.